All right, let's talk about post-flight activities. So what we do on a live leg after we land. And a live leg just means we have passengers on board. So I'll start about 15 or 20 minutes away from the airport. I'll make an in-range call to the FBO that I'm going to be using. And an in-range call means that we'll contact the FBO on the radio and just let them know that we're 15 to 20 minutes out and what services we'll need from them once we get there. So that could be a luggage cart if you know you have a lot of bags in the airplane. It could be a fuel order if you know you're going to be taking fuel, and let them know how much you need. It could be having a rental car brought plainside for the passengers if you know they have one waiting. Just letting them know how long you're going to be there with them on the ramp, or if you need hangar space, all that kind of stuff. And the frequency for the FBO can be found a number of ways. A lot of people use ForeFlight. That's what I normally use. And there's a little button on ForeFlight if you look up the airport that says FBO, and you just hit that button and you can look up the Air Inc. or the ASRI or Unicom frequencies for the FBOs. And those are the frequencies that you can tune in and talk directly to the FBO on. So we've got a couple radios in the airplane. We'll keep one radio on ATC, listening to that, and then we'll talk to the FBO on the other radio when we're in the air. So I'll make that call, let them know I'm coming, so that way they can theoretically get things ready. They can be keeping an eye out for me so that when I taxi around onto the ramp, they are there ready and waiting. So that just makes for kind of, a better customer experience for the passengers if we're not having to wait on a luggage cart to be there, or the rental car, all that kind of stuff. And then I'll land, taxi in, and on the taxi in, I'm actually going to start shutting down some of the systems that I don't need on the ground, so that I can shut the airplane down more quickly once I do park on the ramp. So I'll turn off the oxygen, I'll turn off the EPS. Some guys prefer to leave the EPS on, that way they can check the operation of it when they do shut the engine down. I'll do that once every maybe 10 legs just to make sure the EPS is working, but it's not really a big priority because I know I'm going to test the EPS before flight anyway. So I normally turn that off on the taxi in. And then just making sure I have the airplane ready to go. The flaps are up, the trims are reset, the after landing checklist is complete, and I've got my 2-minute timer running for my cool down period after I select ground idle on the rollout. So I just want the plane to be ready to completely shut down once I taxi into my parking spot. And then once I taxi around onto the ramp, I'll turn off the taxi light, and this is kind of one of those unwritten rules. It's etiquette. Even during the daytime when you taxi onto the ramp, you want to turn off your taxi light so that it's not blinding or obnoxious to your marshal that's waiting there to guide you into your parking space. It's not really that blinding during the daytime, but it's just a good habit to be in. So we'll turn the taxi light off when you're turning onto the ramp, and then you'll get marshaled in, shut the airplane down. After you shut the engine down, you've got a second to record your fuel burn and your hobs, your ending hobs, because you'll need those later for your trip sheet. So you write those down before you turn the batteries off. The line service guys will come up and they'll put the chocks in, and they'll give you the chocks in signal, and then you can release the parking brake. You don't want to forget to release the parking brake, because later if they try to move the airplane and the parking brake is on, you can cause damage or start a brake fire. So as soon as they get those chocks in, just go ahead and take the parking brake off. The airplane's not going to go anywhere with the chocks in. And then I'll jump up, open the door, let the passengers out, open up the cargo door, help them get their bags out of the airplane, and just make sure that they make it into the FBO okay. And just, make sure that they're on their way. They've got their ground transportation there. Everything's copacetic with that. And once the passengers are on their way and they're taken care of, I'll come out back to the airplane and I'll check the oil first thing, because we want to check the oil within 10 minutes of shutdown, ideally, to get the most accurate read. So I'll make sure that the oil is still looking good for the next leg. And the reason you have to check it after shutdown is because the oil has to be hot to get an accurate reading on it. If it's cold, especially if it's kind of on the lower end of the acceptable range, if it's cold, you might not even see it on the gauge because it shrinks. So I'll check the oil, and then I'll do my post-flight walk-around. So this is kind of like a pre-flight walk-around inspection, but abbreviated. And the idea is that if anything broke on the airplane, we want to catch it now. That way we can get the airplane brought in for service as soon as possible, and hopefully not have any disruption to this flight schedule. So you don't just want to close the door and walk away from the airplane because, if you don't want to leave a problem for the next guy to find when his passengers are like 30 minutes away from getting to the airport and have to scrub the flight. So I'll just walk around and I'll look at all the major components and see if I hit any birds. I have found that before. Sometimes you have a bird strike on the wing and you didn't see it or hear it or feel it. So just checking for anything that's out of the normal there. And then I'll put the prop straps on, or prop anchors. So these are straps that we put on the propeller. You've probably seen them on turboprops. Any free turbine engine. The free turbine engine means that the propeller is not actually mechanically connected to the engine. So it can just spin freely around in the breeze. So if there's any wind, the prop can just turn and turn and turn. And you don't really want the prop rotating like that. You don't want that hardware rotating without the lubrication that's provided when the engine is running. It can kind of wear the components down a little bit over time. Plus, it presents a hazard to anybody walking around on the ramp if you have this big, massive propeller that's turning. So we'll anchor the prop with the straps and then come back in and, again, make sure that if the chocks are in, the parking brake is off or released. And then most Pilatuses and a lot of corporate aircraft have a towing sign. And on one side it's green and it says ready to tow, and on the other side it's red and it says do not tow. And you put that sign up in the window so that the line service guys know that either the brake is on or off. So hopefully it's off, and you would put the green side up that says ready to tow so they know that your brakes are off and they can tow you if they need to. Now, if I'm just going to be on the ramp for a few hours, like if it's a day trip, that's pretty much all I'll do. I'll close and lock the doors, but I don't put anything else on the airplane. If I'm going to be there for an overnight, I'll put the overnight kit on the airplane. So the overnight kit has several things in it. Pitot covers, exhaust covers, and also some plugs for the cowling. And I'll put all that stuff on if I'm going to be there overnight, but it's not necessary for just a few hours on the ramp. So then I'll climb back up into the airplane and just tidy up the cabin. So I'll take the trash out. I'll run the hand vac around to pick up any crumbs the passengers may have left behind. I'll lay the belts over to make the seats look pretty. I'll close the window shades, especially if it's hot outside in the summertime, just to keep it a little bit cooler in the cabin. I'll dump the ice and the ice tray out, and also the coffee in the mugs. Just dump those out onto the ramp. If it's a nice FBO and they're a little persnickety about the coffee being dumped on the ramp, you can always take that in and dump it out in the bathroom there. But normally just dumping it out on the ramp is no big deal. And then I'll just check the cabin stock. So I'll open up the drawers to see if the passengers took out any snacks or beverages or anything that I might want to restock for the next leg. And then if it's, again, in the summertime, I'll put the sunshade up and the windscreen in the cockpit just to keep it a little bit cooler in the airplane. And then I'll fill out the trip sheet. Most airplanes have a trip sheet where you fill out your starting hobs, your ending hobs, your fuel burn, your block times in some cases if you're flying 135 for flight time requirements. And then note any squawks. So if there were any maintenance discrepancies, anything broke, I have any MELs, you'll want to note those. And then once that is done, I'll get out, I'll close the doors, lock the doors, go into the FBO, check in with the front desk just to let them know how long I'll be there. If I have a fuel order, I'll give that to them if I didn't already. Sometimes you tell the line service guys directly on the ramp at the airplane, and just kind of generally let them know what you need. And then if there's any bad weather in the forecast, so thunderstorms or even just a lot of wind, or certainly any snow or ice, I'll see if I can get into the hangar. So sometimes they have hangar space, sometimes they don't. It just depends on the airport. It depends on how busy they are, all that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, if there is going to be inclement weather, you do want to have them tow the airplane in the hangar. Otherwise, we'll just leave it out on the ramp. And then I'll get a crew car or a rental car if I'm going to be there overnight, and then head out. Go to the hotel or go get some lunch or whatever my plans are, depending on how long I'm going to be there. And then as I'm pulling out of the parking lot, I'm just thinking about a couple things, just making sure that I did close my flight plan. So if it's a towered airport, the tower takes care of that for you. But if it's an uncontrolled airport, and a lot of times in the Pilatus you are flying into uncontrolled airports, you got to make sure that you remembered to cancel IFR on your own. So I just double check that. And then later on at the hotel or when I get home, I'll fill out my logbook, and I'll do my company paperwork. Usually, different operators have different systems, but there's usually something online that you would log into and then enter in your times from the trip sheet, any maintenance discrepancies, stuff like that. Put your receipts in for your trip expenses, all that kind of stuff. So that's pretty much it. So those are the post-flight activities for the PC-12, the way that I like to do them. Let me know if you guys have any questions. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next video.